Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's edition of The Robust Opposition. I'm your host, Lauren Steiner, and with me is my guest, David Hildebrand, who is running to unseat Dianne Feinstein for Senate in California. How you doing, David?
All right.
You bill yourself as an unapologetic democratic socialist running for U.S. Senate against Dianne Feinstein. You worked as the staging location director on the Bernie Sanders campaign in the greater Sacramento area, and you currently work as a legislative analyst for the state of California, focusing on transportation issues. All right, so that's a good bio. Why don't you talk about this democratic socialism, first of all, because a lot of people don't understand the difference between that and the Democratic Party and socialism. So why don't you define that first before we get into the specific issues I want to ask you about?
Okay, that sounds good. So I don't know how many are familiar, but there's like a matrix online. It's a square, and it shows where different political ideologies fall in that matrix. So democratic socialist is a little to the left of social democrat, and it's a little to the right of full socialist. So basically, a democratic socialist system is where the people decide what socialist policies they want to implement, and then they go and vote to implement those socialist policies. So like FDR's New Deal, that was a democratic socialist policy package, and people voted for that, and they wanted that. So that was put into place. So basically, we still have the democratic thing. A lot of the right wing likes to say, oh, socialists, they're going to take over. They're actually talking about dictatorships that happen to be under the guise of socialism, like many other nations today. They'll say they're Islamic nations or say they're communists or all these different, viewpoints, but in reality, they're just dictatorships.
Socialism kind of means, or the way I used to think it means, is ownership of the means of production, in which there wouldn't be any privately held corporations or investor-held corporations, I guess you could say, but there could be things like worker-owned co-ops. And actually, Richard Wolff, who is one of the foremost socialists in America, is advocating for that, and he calls it basically economic democracy.
Yeah, so what I'm calling democratic socialism, or my view, is kind of like the single-payer program is kind of more what I'm speaking of, to where you take the insurance and the profit out, and you put cost caps on the procedures and whatnot in the system. So there's still a private aspect. The healthcare providers are still a private, aspect of that single-payer system. The government just takes away the profit and takes away their ability to jack up costs. So like as you see now going under ACA, which is more of a social democratic or arguably a Republican form of healthcare, because it was their design in the first place. Instead of that, you have a system that actually controls those costs and doesn't see those costs rising. So this year, I think it was at least in California, insurance costs are going up 12 to 13%. For ACA plans, and some people are getting dropped off their plans. I think you posted about that earlier today. People are getting dropped off their insurance plans. So in this whole, climate of Trump care possibly coming back and the whole battle we just had to protect the ACA, yeah, we need to protect the ACA for now, but that's in the intermediate time until we get single payer, which needs to happen soon. So I'm very much an advocate of single payer. A socialist, like pure socialist medical system would be more like England's or UK's, where it's, everyone's in the system and it's all run by government. So that's not what single payer is advocating. So it's a little, you could say that's to the right of, a single payer plan to go fully, no private companies at all.
Yeah, well, actually, Margaret Flowers, who is the single-payer activist who, along with Carol Harris, both of them are on the board of Physicians for a National Health Program, they got arrested for interrupting Max Baucus's hearings on Obamacare in 2009 because they asked the very valid question, why aren't there any single-payer advocates at this table? And they literally got arrested and hauled out of that room. Now, they actually are calling for no private hospitals either, because as I was just reminded, I learned this, I guess, in Michael Moore's movie Sicko, which came out about 10 years ago, but I had forgotten this fact. that healthcare in this country was not private, was always for non-profit until 1973, when Richard Nixon did a favor for his large campaign contributor, Edgar Kaiser, from Kaiser Permanente, the HMO, by allowing hospitals to make money off of providing health care. So Margaret and them feel that there needs to be I'm sure that they're not saying that doctors have to be working for the government. I mean, doctors can still have private practices and whatnot, but I do believe that they feel there should be no private hospitals. And we've seen a lot of hospitals merging, just like we've seen so many other mergers in this country, in all industries, that you can't really have a private practice anymore. You have to work for one of these large hospitals. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think that obviously a lot of people can agree that we shouldn't have profit in the healthcare system. But you have to remember that when you go nonprofit, when you have cost controls on profit versus nonprofit, there really isn't that much of an active difference, because what you can do is you can take that money and raise people's salaries in CEO positions and high-level management positions in that company. And then they just take that extra money that's no longer profit, now it's salary, and they add that to their own salaries. So we have a lot of nonprofits in this country that basically bilk people who are donating and put all their money in administrative costs, but they're still nonprofit because they're not making any profit. They're not on the public market or anything like that. So, I mean, you still have these issues in nonprofits. So whatever way, the public decides to go, we're still going to need some sort of controls in there. And I think it's easier to sell single payer as a capped profit system where they can have, whatever percentage of profit off of each, procedure, then go nonprofit and have no caps. So we'd still need caps there, but then we need to figure out a way to control salaries. So if you bring, the idea of controlling salaries to the general public instead of controlling profits, I think that's going to be a lot, less popular of a message. So, I mean, we like Nancy Pelosi said, we're capitalists and that's the way it is. Well, yes, but we still need to bring, the controls back down, at least to New Deal era standards.
Right. Well, you can have legislation. I think people have proposed legislation about CEO to average worker pay, because as you know, it's gone up from like 25 to 1 to like 500 to 1 or something crazy like that.
I would be in favor of caps on salaries for CEOs. I think there's a lot more involved in that, obviously, because the CEO isn't the only vastly overpaid person at the company. Yeah. He's just the one we all pay attention to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how far are we going to go in this? I don't know. But, I mean, that CEO pay is the most egregious of them all. I mean, when you have CEO, raises and salary raises and bonuses at the end of the year that are more than anyone will make in their lifetime, then yes, we need to do something about that system. So basically, I'm a trickle-up economist. I believe that we need to put the money in the lower half to the people that are going to spend it, and then it can go up the system, because trickle-down never trickles down. It just stays up there. And we've seen over the last, 50 years where the top 1% has taken all the money, and especially in the last few years, it's appalling how much money has gone up. And it's actually the lowest bracket, I believe it's the bottom 20% of people are actually at a net loss. They're at 115% less than they used to be, because all that extra 15% actually went to the top 1%.
Well, it's interesting because talking about socialism, a famous British socialist, David Harvey, does a great RSA Animate video on YouTube. It's called The Crisis of Capitalism. And he talks about how this was able to happen. Like, he says between World War II and 1980, in the battle between capital and labor, labor was winning, and then it reversed after 1980. And how did it happen that they were able to keep the average salary completely flat, adjusting for inflation, without a revolt of the people? And the answer was credit, because everybody could put everything on their credit cards and live like kings and then pay the piper later. And as we know, in 2008, it all came crashing down. And that was a whole variety of other reasons besides credit. It had to do with, getting rid of GlassSteagall and the Commodities Futures Modernization Act. things that all happened under Bill Clinton, by the way, not George Bush, basically authored by his Treasury Secretary, Robert Rubin, who had been the CEO of Goldman Sachs before he became Treasury Secretary. And then after, he left to join Citicorp, which was the merged company of Travelers and Citigroup, made possible by the repeal of Glass-Steagall. So this is what goes on in government. You have these regulatory agencies that get captured, and we see it here in California, and not only regulatory agencies, but office holders themselves that get captured by industry. I mean, it happened to Chris Dodd. He was a senator, and now he's like the head lobbyist for the Motion Picture Association. And then there was somebody, I think, who worked for Max Baucus, who negotiated the ACA, which completely eliminated the ability to negotiate on drug prices. And then that woman became the chief lobbyist for Big Pharma. So what do you think could be done, assuming that you get to Washington and you become a senator? What do you think we can do about these conflicts of interest?
Basically, we need to end Citizens United. And what I was saying is I don't care how they end it. If they want to end it through the move to Manway, the Wolfpack way, that's fine. We need to do that. But then on top of that, we need revolving doors to be closed. So basically what I would want to initiate legislatively is close down the loophole that lets legislators or any office holders leave office and start into a new company and become, a lobbyist or whatever for that company. So basically what I would want to do is have a lifetime ban from that office holder going into that company through a revolving door. So we're still going to have a problem with people coming from corporations into the government, but I think that's less harmful than them leaving, because if they come into the government, like say Exxon exec comes into the government from Exxon, that's already bad enough. But then if he leaves and goes right back to Exxon, he's going to get big bonuses for what he did in office. So he already has a plan to go in and leave. If we take that exit door out, at least that'd be good. I think it would be a lot harder to write legislation to ban people from going into the government, government work from companies. But I think banning them once they leave office is a lot easier.
Yeah, now let's talk about financial reform, because I heard a really interesting show today. I couldn't listen to the whole show because I was driving to an appointment, but I was listening to Warren Olney's To the Point today. And he interviewed Gretchen Morgenstern, who's one of the business reporters, Pulitzer Prize-winning business reporters for the New York Times, and also Nomi Prinz, who's actually an acquaintance of mine. She wrote All the President's Bankers. Speaking of Goldman Sachs, she used to work for Goldman Sachs, and now she writes about it. And they started off the story talking about how Wall Street the stock market has hit a record high. It's at 22. The Dow has passed 22,000. And that Trump is using this as an example to show how his economic policies are working, when in reality we know that only about 10% of Americans can afford to have money in the stock market, and that the people that make the greatest gains are the 1% and the 1/10 of 1% and the 1/100th of 1%. And what Gretchen Morgenstern was saying that is what they are doing, how they're pumping up the stock market value, is with unprecedented stock buybacks. They have bought back $360 billion worth of stock, which is completely unprecedented. And that is money that is going to inflate the stock price, but doesn't do anything about putting money into growing businesses that would hire workers and would boost the average economy. And one of the reasons they do this is because the CEO's salaries are tied to the stock price. I mean, not their salary, but their stock options, which they can exercise annually, I think. I don't want to misstate the details, but I think you get the point of what I'm trying to say. So, I mean, if you were to get into the Senate, what kinds of reforms would you want to see instituted that would rein in Wall Street and return the economy back to working for the 99%?
So I'll just say right off, I'm not a financial guru. So I won't get the details right either on this, but I think we do need reforms to ensure that we don't have banks going in and investing a ton of money and crashing the market or manipulating stock prices like you were mentioning just to make more of a profit. I think more of a high level issue, that's causing all this is it's not their goal to raise wages for workers. It's not their goal to, make better benefits packages. It's not their goal to, make better retirement packages or anything like that. It's their goal to make profit for their shareholders and for themselves. So maybe if we remove the fiduciary rule, I'll get a lot of flack for this from the right wing, but basically, they're not working to benefit the worker. They're actually legally obligated to profit the shareholders, to raise shareholder value. So, I mean, that would be something we could actually look at that might make a difference, to make them actually have to answer, to the, to the workers, to the shareholders in a way that actually benefits those workers and those stockholders. So a lot of the lower level stockholders don't realize that companies can sell you a stock and they have no obligation to tell you whether it's good or bad, or to sell you good or bad stocks. They can sell you whatever they want. So basically, if they know, they have money in one stock and that's went down, then they can go manipulate by telling everyone, buy this stock, I'm putting your money in this stock, this is a great stock. As soon as the stock goes up, they can sell. And then, all those other people, after they sell, it crashes, all those other people are out all their money. But the person, is devoid of all risk because they're not legally required to tell them anything about the value of that stock or anything they might know.
Well, one of the things they talked about, and I'm sure you will agree with this, is restoring Glass-Steagall, which is the wall that they got rid of, to separate commercial banking from investment banking. And an idea that Nomi came up with was incentivizing these corporations through tax subsidies, not tax breaks, but actually subsidies if they would hire more workers. So there are things they could do. And a great book that I would like my readers, my viewers to know about is called Winner Take All Politics: How Washington Made the Rich Richer and Turned Its Back on the Middle Class. And this is by two political economists, Paul Piercy and Jacob Hacker from Berkeley and Stanford, who wrote a book on why this inequality is happening. And they're saying that it's not because of automation, because of computerization, because of globalization, all the usual suspects. It's actually because of policies that Washington has done that favor the rich, and things that they have not done, which they call drift in the book, which would have helped the middle class. So this is the type of thing. But, when you have these corporations that have $1,000 an hour lawyers and $1,000 an hour lobbyists, the health, you're talking about the health insurance, they have 8 lobbyists for every member of Congress, I found out. And that's one of the reasons why they get their way, and why the new Pew study shows that that Americans really don't believe that our politicians represent us. And that could be why they're not voting, because they just have given up on the system, and why the I think it was the Princeton study, showed that we're not a democracy, that we actually are a plutocracy because the corporations run everything.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Obviously, I think we need Glass-Steagall. That's on my platform, on my website. But, when it comes down to it, it comes down to the fact that, money basically talks. And if you follow the money, you'll always find, why real decisions are made. And I believe you're right. That's why people aren't voting. I don't think that's, just a belief. That's a fact. I mean, people that I talk to, they say they're not interested in voting. In 2016, they didn't vote because they didn't have a candidate. They did in the primary, but they didn't in the general. So, I mean, I know people personally. We have, between me and my girlfriend, we have some far right-leaning people in the family. A lot of them voted for Bernie in the primary because they didn't like Trump. But then when the general election rolled around, and it was Hillary versus Trump, you had, the populist candidate versus the status quo, that they went and voted for Trump. And these are people that said, I would never vote for Trump. He's a racist. They had some own personal experience with discrimination in their life, and they still went and voted for Trump. So that's the power, of the populist movement in 2016. And I think this is still happening, where we're not going to vote for those status quo people as a voting public anymore. We want actual real change, and we're not going to vote for people who don't bring that change. And we're not going to vote for people who accept corporate donations and have all this dark money flowing into their campaigns. I mean, the voters have really, I believe, woken up to what's really going on in the system. And the more we open our eyes, the more we see that, it all comes back to money. All decisions are made by money. So like Cory Booker, went in and voted against the drug price reduction bill after he received money from Big Pharma. So Senator Feinstein, who I'm running against, obviously, she went to a couple weeks before, she went to a fundraiser. I like that. She went to a fundraiser for Big Pharma and health insurance companies and whatnot. And then at her first town hall in her life, she came out and said that she was against single payer as a government takeover of all medicine, which I mentioned in previous interviews. That means that, one, she either doesn't know what single payer is, or two, she's bought. And obviously, I believe it's option two, because she knows exactly what single payer is. It has nothing to do with healthcare providers. The government isn't taking over anything. It's just becoming the money person in place of the insurance, and cutting out those profit and advertising fees and bringing in cost controls, like we mentioned earlier. So it's not a government takeover. It's basically a regulated private market still, but it's not a regulated private market that the cost can, skyrocket over 5 years, like what happened with Obamacare.
Well, as you know, I did not one, but two protests. The first one was called Feinstein Don't Run, and the second one was called Retire Feinstein. And in the first one, it was at a fundraiser that she was having. She still hasn't officially declared whether she's running, but all indications seem that she is, because she is raising money. And I did ask her the question at the end if she didn't think that maybe she'd had a good long run of it, and wouldn't it be time to step aside and give someone else a chance. And she kind of bobbed and weaved and didn't really answer that question, except to say that she didn't necessarily think so. So, I mean, we'll have to see what she does. But, she took hundreds of thousands of dollars from the health insurance industry, along with Nancy Pelosi. And so my question is, all of these Democrats, it was you worked on SB 562, and it was the Democratic Party here in California that killed it, at least for this year. And we have a 2/3 majority, and we have a Democratic governor. But those mod Dems did not want to vote for a single payer, just like they didn't want to vote for a ban on fracking, because it would upset their corporate paymasters. And Jerry Brown also. I don't know. I haven't researched how much money he's taken from the health insurance industry, but we do know that he's taken nearly $10 million from big oil. And Jerry Brown basically told Anthony Rendon that he did not want to see a single payer bill on his desk. So my question to you is, with the Democrat, and the other thing that I mentioned in my speech, we busted up. There was a DNC CDP rally. It was called the Summer Resistance Rally, and Keith Ellison was here, and Ted Lieu was here. He's the head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and Brad Sherman, who also has not signed on to co-sponsor H.R. 676. I'm going to do a protest of him at the end of this month at his town hall. But anyway, basically Nancy Pelosi said, when asked if she thought single payer should be what the Democrats run on in 2018, she said no, because I don't think the public support is there yet. And you know, because you've quoted this, that at least in California, 70% of the people want single payer, and nationwide, a new study confirmed that 62%. So a majority of people now in California and nationwide want single payer. The Democratic Party is not running on it. Only a few senators have come out in favor of it. So my question to you is, why are you running as a Democrat? You're a corporate-free candidate. Why don't you run no party preference like Gail McLaughlin is?
Okay, great answer for that. I don't know why Gail made her decision. I mean, I can't read her mind or anything. But basically, the Democratic Party in California is not the DNC. It's a mini version of the DNC in some ways. Obviously, we still have some corruption issues, citing the recent CDP chair election. But at the core of it, there is a huge movement in California inside the Democratic Party to basically push the progressive agenda by replacing people in office and replacing people that run the Democratic Party in California, the CDP. So in the last chair election, we actually were 51 for the corporatists and 49% for the what I would call the Bernie-crats or the Dem-enters, the progressive wing of the party. So we're almost the majority already. I mean, if you give us a couple years, we're literally going to have the numbers to take over the party. So now if I was in a different state, I would probably not run Democratic because there's no value to it. But there's numerous clubs in California. Obviously, we have a central committee for every county. And a lot of these clubs and central committees lean heavily progressive, and some in areas that you would never believe lean heavily progressive. So before I actually ran and decided to register as a Democrat, I was actually considering running independent. I went, to survey, the public basically on their ideas about the independent, or I even surveyed the Green Party. I wasn't planning on running with their party, but it's kind of like, it was comical, the response I got. Basically, there is no one who's actively doing anything to elect candidates outside the Democratic Party. So I have an acquaintance, I won't mention his name because he probably doesn't want me putting this out here, but basically he went to the Green Party here near Sacramento and said, hey, I'm running for office for such and such office, I'm running as a Green, and they said, great, we'll endorse you. So he got their endorsement. And I asked him, so how is that going to help you? And I joked around, I said, he mentioned that, they're going to go out and canvass and door knock for him and phone bank. And I said, all 7 of them as a joke. No, I said all 5 of them as a joke. And he said, no, 7. And he said, but I get your point.
Yeah.
So I had another guy I talked to who was campaigning for a different office who did the same thing. He went to go run Green. The Green Party told him, great, you can bring up our party for your run. And then he asked them, so what are you going to contribute to my campaign as a party? And they said, we're not going to contribute anything. We're not going to help out at all, but you can help spread our message.
Right. Well, he basically, told them no and went independent after that. Well, I'm not really talking about the Green Party because I don't think that's such a great idea. But what I'm talking about is when you run independent, you can get Republican votes, whereas there's going to be a lot of Republicans that are not going to vote for a Democrat. Now, one thing I will say that Dianne Feinstein said at the end of that impromptu conversation she had with us when she came over to our protest, which I have to give her credit for, at the same time, she has not she finally held her first 2 town halls in 24 years of being a senator. And, I've tried to lobby her several times. I've tried to lobby her on the war in Syria when we were looking like we were getting involved in that civil war in 2014. She locked us out of her office. We tried to have a lobby meeting with her about not voting for TPP fast track. She locked us out of her office. But we were able to have a citizen lobby meeting with her staffer last year before they voted on the new DARK Act, which would have essentially, and which did because it passed, eliminate the Vermont's and also Hawaii's GMO labeling law. And this was an act that was pushed for by the Grocery Manufacturers Association, by Monsanto, because they didn't want to have those 5 little words that said includes genetically modified ingredients. What would have been the simplest thing in the world. But no, they voted for this bill that you would have to install. There would be a QR code. So you'd have to have a smartphone, which only 33% of people have. You'd have to have the QR reader app. Then you'd have to point your phone at the app. And I mean, it's a ridiculous process. And I use the example, imagine a mom walking down the aisle of a supermarket with a toddler on her hips, trying to manipulate the smartphone. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then, so she's listening, and we were so thoughtful. We all came through with our different points of view from our different organizations, whether it was human health, whether it was the environment, whether it was consumer choice, whatever our points of view were. And she's listening and she's writing notes. And then, of course, Dianne Feinstein votes for the new Dark Act, along with Debbie Stabenow, by the way, who's the minority the ranking member, they call it, of the Agriculture Committee. So she's the Democrat, and John Roberts, or Pat Roberts, or somebody Roberts, anyway, is the Republican who heads that committee. And this was a little deal they had. The two of them get more money from Big Ag than any other senators. And Dianne Feinstein, of course, has taken over $1.6 million from Monsanto, we found out. But that's a digression. What I wanted to say was, at the end of that speech, she said, and I wrote down the word, she said, I represent the whole state, which is composed of different people, and I feel that it is my job to bring people together. So you do know that the inland part of our state is pretty much all red. And you do remember that Kimberly Ellis, one part of her campaign was to reach out to the rural counties. She said that we shouldn't rest on our laurels because all of our constitutional officers were Democrats, all of our cities were Democrats, and she wanted to redefine what it means to be a Democrat by reaching out to all people, all working people, no matter, where they live. So first of all, what do you think of Dianne Feinstein's comment that she feels like she should represent all people? Do you feel that when you're the senator of a state, you should be representing all your constituents, that it's not a matter of your party anymore? What are your views on that?
So definitely, I do feel that you should represent all people in the state. I mean, you're the overarching senator for that state. We only have two of us, in the state. So I believe that you should represent the people. But citing your example of the Dark Act, it's not representing the people to hide information behind a label. That one thing you didn't even bring up about that is, if I pick up a package of food and I see a UPC or whatever QR code on it, I don't even know what that means. I just throw it in the cart and continue shopping. I just figure it's some sort of scan thing they're going to scan at the register. So if I'm just the typical, person just shopping, or the woman with the kid on her hip trying to juggle her phone, she's not going to be scanning things. She's not even going to know what that QR code means. So I run down to the gas station once in a while and get a bag of candy. So I looked at the bottom back of the package, and the package said, this isn't required by law. The package said, made with genetically modified ingredients, right on the package. What did I do? I still bought that bag of candy and still brought it back to my office and ate it. Yeah. So my point is that I believe the consumer, which is all of the state, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, have a right to know what's in their food. And when it goes down to representing the whole state instead of your party, right now the Democratic Party doesn't represent the whole state, even if they're, in power, even if they're 2/3 majority, even though they have that huge voter backing. They have that huge voter backing because they have the D next to their name, and that's how people vote. So a lot of people aren't involved enough with the system to actually delve into what these people believe and go past, their campaign slogan. And once they get into office, they'll re-vote for them because they remember their name. So it's sort of a dual responsibility. It's a responsibility on the candidate and the voter. So basically what I think we should do is we should put forward a platform like I have on my flyer that you've probably seen online multiple times. Basically a platform that actually it's across party lines. It's across any personal or religious beliefs. I mean, single payer for all. I mean, that's non-discriminatory. I mean, it's taking care of everybody, equally, which is like the basis of most religions. Getting dark money out of politics is what I have on my flyer. A lot of people gave me flack because it doesn't say Citizens United. But I'll go back to the fact that Citizens United is a catchphrase for people who know what's going on in politics. And if you tell the general public Citizens United, they might not know what that means. So I think we need to, our message on our platform needs to be clear. but it also needs to be specific. So it's like different things that I believe in are actually across, like I mentioned, across party lines in ending right to work and promoting unions and strengthening unions. That helps all workers, no matter what party you belong to. So if you institute a card check program and let people organize for union, that represents everybody. Now, there's a lot of Republicans who are members of unions who don't pay, their fair share or whatever if they can get away with it. But if we stress, and this is another responsibility on the unions too, if they stress the importance of what they do and got people more involved with the union rather than hold them out kind of like the party does, then that would actually strengthen them more. I mean, like to TPP and NAFTA, I mean, no one actually, if they know anything about TPP and NAFTA that is part of the working class, agrees that those were good ideas. I mean, we had millions of people lose their jobs over NAFTA, and even Mexico got hurt through NAFTA. A lot of people don't realize that, but Mexico got hurt through NAFTA as well. Yeah. So I mean, it hurt workers in both countries, Mexico and the U.S. It hurt both countries. So. But it only hurt the working class, not the top 1%. They made their profit off of it. So when it comes down to it, a progressive agenda reaches all people. And that's why you saw Bernie win the whole northern end of the state and several quote unquote red counties, in the rest of the state, because he actually brought, a message to the working class, to people, and gave them hope that, hey, maybe we can actually fix this corrupt system. So that's why that happened. And when it came down to the general, obviously we know what happened there, but we've already discussed, what's going on there. I mean, in California also, I think, going back to your previous question about why run as a Democrat, I think everyone, unless you're in a safe red county, runs as a Democrat. I mean, if you just watch the elections and the debate, you have, you always have the Democrat that's more liberal and the Democrat that's more conservative, and basically the mod Dems are basically the California Republicans.
Right.
So they vote Republican, but they have the D next to their name so they can get on the ballot. And another thing, since we're in a top two primary, there's not even a mainstream Republican actually in the race yet. There's a couple that are earning some money real fast right now, so that they might become more popular. But there's not really, a set in stone Republican running in the race. So if it comes down to it and there's two Democrats on the ticket, and you have Feinstein, who's a well-known name to conservatives, and then you have David Hildebrand underneath her on the general election ballot, who do you think Republicans are going to vote for if they do vote? They're going to vote David Hildebrand because they don't like Feinstein. They already know that. Progressives will also vote David Hildebrand. So my main battle is actually in the primary, I believe. Getting past the top two primary into the second round for the general. I think that's actually where we need to do the most work.
Well, maybe it's a good time to transition into talking about the campaign and how you're going to do that. Have you raised any money?
We've raised a little over $5,000, which is chump change compared to what Dianne Feinstein has, obviously. But those are all small individual donations. I've only donated about, I think it's like 250. It's all on my financial records, which are available on FEC, obviously. But those were because I was buying, the initial materials for the campaign. On materials, like I've showed you before, got flyers. We just printed up bumper stickers. So we're still trying to figure out how to get those out. We're a skeleton crew with no paid employees, basically. So we need someone to help us, pack and send them once we get people interested in having them. So I will be bringing them to my event. As for strategy, I don't like to get into a lot of strategy for obvious reasons, because I don't want to give away, how we're planning on winning this. That we won the, what's it called? We went through the slates, we won the ADEM elections. But what I can tell you is that I have people from San Diego, LA area, Bay Area, all the way up to Northern California, already passing out my flyers to progressives in their areas to get people interested in the campaign. Obviously, I have an online presence. All my money has actually been raised just through Facebook and Twitter. I have not done a single fundraiser so far, and I already have a few $1,000s in the bank. There's a lot of people getting really interested in the campaign, and a lot of people actually interested in working. So our volunteer list is getting pretty big. And we're actually going to start putting those people to work late August and then September. We already have the Sacramento area or Sacramento County voter file. So we're going to start phone banking in Sacramento, get fundraising through the local area through phone banking, get the name out there, basically that, and through the bumper stickers, which I'll be sending out, to people all over the state, and basically increasing that name recognition. So I think a lot of people are looking for a different option, but they don't know what options there are out there. So I think that really increasing the name recognition and sending out, what my platform actually is to people, that's all it's really taken to get people real excited in what I'm doing and what I'm trying to build. So a lot of people get on me about never being in politics before this. Well, I've been a legislative analyst for 6 years, so I'm very much involved in the legislative process. And my argument about that is also, I have a couple arguments about, inexperience, quote unquote, in politics. Well, one, I'm going to be coming from an 8 to 5 job, Monday through Friday, having the experience of someone who actually has to work, a regular job, pay regular bills. I'm not wealthy at all. I mean, my salary is actually searchable on the internet because I'm a state employee. So people actually look that up and probably laugh because I'm not a rich man. And basically, I'm coming from, that background. If you read my bio on my website, I kind of give a history of where I come from. And basically, I've been on unemployment. I've been on, for a very short time, workers' comp because I hurt myself at work making minimum wage. I've, been on hard labor jobs, laying paving stones, pouring concrete and all that stuff before I decided to go to college. And then that was a battle in itself. I've experienced 2 market downturns, one right after I graduated high school. I was going to be a carpenter. The carpenters union wasn't hiring because there was no job, so I couldn't get into the apprenticeship system. When I graduated college, the next crash, the housing crash, had just happened. So then I got out of there. There was a hiring freeze across basically every political job in the state, and no one was hiring out of the state because there was really no money. So then I was on unemployment for 6 months. So basically, I'll give you this story because it basically shows that I actually have the experience of someone who's in working class, someone who has actually lived off of $800 a month unemployment. I mean, Dianne Feinstein and most of these people in office have never had any experience even close to that. So basically, there's the experience, of actually living a real, genuine, life and actually having to do things. So, and then the other end of the thing, when you go through the normal system of getting into office, people run for school board. They don't care about what's happening at the school. They don't care about any of that stuff. They run for school board because that's the first step to going to higher office. Then they run for city council or state or county supervisor. Then they go for state legislature or governor. Then they go on to Congress. Then they go on to Senate, and then they want to run for president. So through this process, they've been ground down by corporate donations and corporate interests, and that puts them farther and farther away from that experience of actually being a working class person. So, I mean, I could go on about, the reason why I believe that it's better to get people from outside of politics to run. But I mean, I could go on forever, but it kind of brings me to the point that people ask me, well, once you get into office, won't you run forever? And I tell them, no, I have no desire in running, forever. I believe in term limits. I think there should be 12-year term limits on Senate and the Assembly. So if someone gets in, if they're Senate, they can run 2 terms. If they're Congress, they could run, 6 to get up to that 12 years, and then that's it. And then you go out and let new people in. I think 24 years for Feinstein is far too long. I mean, half that was probably too long for her, judging by the way she votes, in my opinion. But that's, that's the way I feel.
Well, listen, you've said a lot there, and I want to unpack some of it because while I agree that you don't necessarily have to have experience as a politician to run for office, and as you know, brand new Congress started off by specifically seeking out people who have no experience. They want teachers and lawyers and doctors and workers, because they feel that exactly what you said, that regular people are going to be more empathetic to the concerns of other regular people than professional politicians. But that said, there's no reason to denigrate starting at the local level. I mean, that's what the Republicans did. They started at the local level, and they've been able to take over all of these states, the legislatures and the governorships, because they started with the school board. And I don't see anything wrong. Well, first of all, so that's one thing. It is a valid strategy, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's because you want to be a professional politician. I think that at the local level, you could make greater change because you are closer to your constituents, and they see you. Sometimes they see you at the grocery store. They see you at town meetings if you're not Dianne Feinstein and actually hold your town meetings. But local officials, especially here in California, where you see that we're trying to make a lot of changes. I mean, Los Angeles in particular, I don't know what's going on in Sacramento, but Los Angeles in particular, we just got started the process of divesting from Wells Fargo. We just got started the process of developing a city bank. So there's a lot of things you could do, and it's very exciting to be a politician where you can actually affect change. So my question to you is, two questions. Why didn't you start with local office? You talk about, I saw in another interview, your Representative Pan, who is a doctor, who didn't even vote for single payer. He voted present or abstained or whatever, you know. And also, why would you want to go to Washington when it is controlled by Republicans, at least for, you know, the near future, and there's such gridlock on the federal level? Because both parties, I'm going to just tell you a little story. I was a delegate for Bernie at the convention in Philadelphia, and I happened to be on the subway with Janice Hahn, who was a congresswoman, but only for one term, and she quit to come back to, she's now on the Board of Supervisors in Los Angeles. And I said to her, why are you leaving Congress? Is it because the Republicans obstruct anything that the Democrats want to get done? And she said, no, Lauren, it's also Nancy Pelosi. She has made it very clear that we are not to cooperate with the Republicans on anything they want to do, even if we agree with it. And I happen to want to govern in a bipartisan fashion. So I thought that was very interesting to hear that from a outgoing U.S. Congresswoman. So your thoughts on that?
So you kind of asked a few questions before your story. So on the local thing, I'm not trying to denigrate starting locally, but we have to remember I mentioned the people that go into that school board and don't care about what's going on in the school. So I would hope progressives who go into that position actually care about what happens on that school board and what happens in that school. So that's a whole different issue. I'm talking about, you know, the people that go in with the goal of attaining higher office, not with the goal of creating change. Second on that, we don't have time. A friend posted online today, basically, this is my depressing post. We don't have, you know, if we start at the local level, you know, the climate's going to change. It's going to destroy us all before we even make it to the distance that what I would say the Republicans have made now by starting at that local level. We need a couple decades to get to that point. We don't have time. So my belief is that we need to run people on every level. And if we win, we win. If we don't, we don't. But we need someone present. We need that option because, you know, my platform is, you know, remove all, you know, fossil fuels by 2035 and be on completely renewable energy, 100%. So this is already proven to be possible with our current technology. This isn't even waiting for something miraculous to happen. This is just waiting for political will. So, you know, we can do these things now, but we need the political will and the people in office. So a third point on that is if we do not put people in place in those higher offices now, then when the Democrats, quote unquote, take over that, you know, the Senate and the House again, which they will in, you know, a certain number of years, it's going to whiplash and go back to the Democrats' control. If we have corporate Democrats still in those positions, do you think we're going to get single payer? Do you think we're going to get, you know, the minimum wage lifted to $15 an hour, a fair wage? Do you think we're going to end corporate, you know, corporate donations to candidates? No, they're benefiting off of not doing stuff and accepting those corporate donations. So we can't just vote blue no matter who, like a lot of people are stressing right now versus Trump. We need to vote blue. Plus, we need to vote, you know, progressive people that will actually make the changes that we need. So when we do take back over, even though it's going to be a trudge, you know, through mud for the next few years, We need people willing to take those offices. We need people willing to trudge through that mud and that inactivity and plan, much unlike the Republicans did for the last 8 years for repealing Obamacare. You see what happened to that. It blew up in their face because they didn't do their homework. They could have taken out Obamacare if they wanted to. They didn't do their homework. They didn't even have a bill set up to do that. So what we need is we need to go in there and make that march, that war zone that is currently the Senate and the Congress and the presidency, and actually we can gain that experience and that strength as we go forward. But if we don't do that and we just sit back and say, well, that's too high of an office, we can't do that. Oh, we're not going to make it. We're not going to win. If we have that attitude, it's self-fulfilling prophecy. We're not going to win. We're going to have the same corporate Democrats win. They're still going to be accepting corporate donations, and we're going to be back to the Bill Clinton era of giving it all away, or even Obama giving it all away to the corporations and not affecting any real change. So a lot of people say, oh, Obama did this, Obama did that. Yeah, he did some good things. I'm not arguing against that. ACA did make some important changes to our healthcare system, allowing kids to stay until they're 26. That's great. Pre-existing condition protections, that's great. But it just didn't go far enough. So we need to keep moving forward. And if we don't have people willing to do that, and we elect the same corporate Democrats and Republicans even into office, they're not going to do anything. They're not going to change. They'll even run on single payer. They'll even run on raising the minimum wage. As soon as they get into office, they're going to change back when they get control because they have that power and that's what they want.
Why don't you repeat your website, since I can't put it up, so people can find out more about you and get involved in your campaign?
DavidForCalifornia.com.
That's great. And I want to take some questions. You had a couple of campaign ideas here, some strategic ideas from Skip Townsend. You might want to look at the comments and reply.
I most definitely will be looking in the comments after we're done.
Yeah, I can't put it up here, but he says, repeat your message to the point where folks hear your message so much they will say, that's David. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things I think you can do. Look, Gail McLaughlin is going around the state, and I know that you're working a job. I don't know if you've accrued any vacation days or if you can get some in advance, but she's basically going around the state doing meetings with Bernie groups and activist groups. I organized an event for her at my house with many different issue groups to make her self known around the state. And that's a great way to get volunteers, especially if you're running a corporate-free campaign and you're not taking big donations. Social media, as you've mentioned, is key. Getting on shows like mine and other people's shows. There aren't a lot of California-specific shows, but there's definitely some nationwide progressive shows you could be on. You were already on Jimmy Dore. There's Tim Black. There's other people I could help you with. Get on their shows, and then maybe people can send you money. Do you have an Act Blue account?
Yes, and that's available through the website. If you want the direct link, you can just go to the website, davidforcalifornia.com, add the /donate now, and that's how you get to the donations. As for going around the state, I'm actually going to start that in September. I will be kicking it off, if all goes right, kicking it off at the LA event for Tim Canova. Mm-hmm. We're planning that right now, so that's on September 2nd. We might do a little before that. I am in between selling and buying a house right now, so I'm a little locked down for the next couple of weeks. But when that's done, I'm basically going to launch like a rocket and be a weekend warrior and head all over the state. So I am planning on going to Northern California, Orange County too. I saw that comment. But definitely I'm going everywhere I can in the state, not just focusing on LA and San Francisco, because I think it's important to get everyone involved. Like you mentioned, Kimberly Ellis's campaign earlier, she didn't, ignore people. She went everywhere, and I think that's really what strengthened her campaign. I was obviously a big supporter during that as well. So, yeah, Bernie won the northern half of the state in the primary. I understand that's Democrats, but, that's who we're looking for, at least in the primary. Our open primary kind of makes it a little different, but at the same time, we need to win those people over as well. So, my girlfriend grew up in Wheatland. I grew up in Lodi, or technically Woodbridge, so we're not from the big cities. We're from, smaller towns. She's from way out in the country. When we go to visit her parents, we're going on dirt roads type of country. So So yeah, so we have that experience of not just living in the big city. So
well, we may have to get your girlfriend on the next show because she could be a huge asset for you, just like Jane Sanders was a huge asset for Bernie. But
she's very much a progressive firebrand, just like me. She's actually in the other room working on a Wolfpack, thing right now at the same time as I'm doing this interview. So she's very engaged in politics. If you go in the Sacramento City Council, you'll see Rachel Ann Vanderwerf pop up on the screen, screaming at him about homeless issues. So she's very active in the local community. I'm very proud of her. But she does a lot of hard work in this area for a lot of different issues. So, I mean, she's as active as me. We barely see each other sometimes, but it works out because we're both the same, personality types. We want to get stuff done. We want to do things that everyone tells us we can't. So that's why we're here.
Yeah, great. Well, listen, I've really enjoyed having you on, and I wish you a lot of luck. I guess it's going to be better if Dianne Feinstein runs than if she doesn't run, because if she runs...
My answer to people is whether, like people ask me, if Feinstein doesn't run, are you still going to run? Yeah, of course I am, because what they're going to do is they're going to throw like 10 corporate candidates into the mix, and then it's all going to funnel down to one, kind of like with the governor's race, they funneled down basically to Gavin Newsom now. He's made the most money. So people are basically backing him. So when it funnels down to that one candidate, that's exactly what I need. I need them to funnel down all their money, all their corporate cash into one candidate, and I need to be that other option. So, I mean, that's the whole goal of the primary strike campaign is to, strike, in the primary, get in the top two. I mean, I don't have any aspirations or beliefs that I'm going to win, the primary by so much that it's going to be unquestionable or anything like that, which it still doesn't matter. You still have to go on in the Senate race. But yeah, so I don't have any illusions about that. But I think that if we get into the top two, final general election, then I think that we would have a chance at winning. So if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be running.
So I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank David for running. We need more people taking on these corporate candidates. Thank you, David, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And I want to wish everybody a good night and keep fighting.